Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, September 7th. Hatsqualin, please Lat Squamish, Okameo. We are meeting tonight on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I would like to welcome all my colleagues back to Council Chambers. This is the first time we've all met together since the beginning of the pandemic, so it feels pretty good. And also, we are missing a council member. Councillor Stoner is taking her maternity leave, and we would like to congratulate her on the safe arrival of her daughter earlier in the summer. So, Council, there's an amended agenda in front of you. It includes the suggested proclamation request about National Forest Week. I would also like to amend the order of the agenda to put item 10A1, the section 57, following our delegations, petitions, and proclamations. So it would happen just in advance of item 6. So if that is there a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. Until we have a new procedures bylaw, we still have to pass Ministerial Order M192. So that pursuant to the Ministerial Order, the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. There is limited in-person attendance. The meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. The meeting is also open to the public for electronic participation via WebEx. And as I said, there is limited in-person attendance in council chambers to observe the meeting. Someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Ray, second by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, any notice of motion? Seeing none, we will move on to item 5. So first up is a proclamation request for National Forest Week. I believe we're joined by Jacqueline McNichol and possibly Sterling Angus electronically. Jacqueline, if you can hear me, you're welcome to turn your camera on. The floor is yours. There, we can see you now.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me? I can't hear anyone there, so I'm uncertain if to go or not.
Can you see us? We can hear you. Yep. Can you hear us, Jacqueline?
Do you want to give like a thumbs up? Because I can't hear anyone. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you. I appreciate everyone taking the time to allow me to speak today. I graduated in from BCAT in 2003, after which point I found a job in forestry, and every day I'm continuously proud of the support, passion, and genuine love of our industry that continues to keep it alive and thrive despite the adversity and change that it's faced with many times over long since my involvement. The revenue generated from our forestry and volunteer hours from those within allows for improvements to education, healthcare, recreation, and important social services for local communities such as ours. Employing more than 100,000 people provincially, our forest industry contributes upwards of $4 billion a year through stumpage rates generated associated with the harvest of timber on Crown land. With the Squamish Community Forest close to its finalization, it is of utmost importance to showcase the contributions that our industry has and continues to make for our community while promoting education and involving those who will be the stewards of our forests now and into the future. The community forest is an amazing opportunity to encourage and provide employment, recreation, and skills training opportunities through the local forest industry, which are vital to social development and meaningful reconciliation with our local Indigenous communities. With the involvement of our local forest professionals in Squamish and around the province and other dedicated technicians who have been able to make a life in Squamish and continue to raise a family here, we have the ability and commitment to provide a background to those new to Squamish while showcasing how our community came to be and the dedication and passion that comes with it. It's for this reason and many others that I am happy to answer questions about that I request the District of Squamish declare September 19th to 25th, 2021 as National Forest Week to align with National Forest Week across Canada on those same dates. Thank you. I can't hear anyone still, so I don't know if we can, if there's like a chat there's a chat option down there, so anyone has questions, I can read the chat and respond.
Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Anderson.
Ms. McNichol, I wonder if you could briefly describe what is your own job in the industry? What is the nature of your work?
Oh man. Oh, what is the nature of your work? I actually work for a forestry company that I've been employed and now part owner of since 2003. When I got out of BCIT, I took a short hiatus to move to Squamish, and I worked at the dryland as a grader and log tagger before Inafor left Squamish. I have a wide, I mean, our industry is so vast. I manage 2 woodlots, one held by the BCIT Forest Society in Maple Ridge, and another one in Darcy, just held by a private individual. And through those woodlots, I mean, honestly, they're the most, they're my favorite part of my work. There's a huge education piece there. I'm able to work with students attending BCIT in the forestry program. They're a nonprofit organization, so we do a lot of different things just through community involvement, working with local trail users, and it's beyond rewarding. It's awesome. Aside from that, I just look over permitting, legislation, assessments, visual assessments, everything that comes with our industry. I mean, I could say it's never a boring line of work because you're constantly learning, and it has a ton of community involvement in whatever aspect that you're involved with it. So that is what I do on my work life.
Right, Council, Councilor Pettengill.
Yeah, I'd like to move declaration with, and I'd like to have a whereas clause. Sorry, to move the declaration with an amendment to the whereas clause, and add a whereas clause, and I can send it shortly. Whereas, and this is in addition, whereas extreme forest fires and our climate emergency have increased the importance of healthy forests and preserving remaining old growth forests, and have highlighted the incredible intrinsic as well as economic value that forests provide.
Is there anyone that
Yes,
wants to
Eric.
second that?
Right, I'm happy to second Councillor Pettingill's motion.
Okay, that's been seconded. Any further discussion? Councillor Anderson.
Just quickly, it occurs to me that we're going to kick off National Forestry Week a day early here in Squamish with the 64th edition of the Squamish Days Law of Sports Festival, which occurs on September 18th. National Forestry Week officially starts the next day. We just want to offer the best wishes for a successful event for the Squamish Days Law of Sports Festival, with which Jacqueline McNichol is currently president. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion carries. So maybe Harley, you can just let her know that her motion's carried.
That was really embarrassing. I have someone texting me, so it's all good, and I'm so sorry. Thank you very much. I'll try and get this sorted, and I very appreciative of everyone's time. This is a extremely important issue to me, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNichol. Hopefully we'll get the audio worked out for next time. All right, moving on to item 2, a proclamation request for Rail Safety Week from September 20th to 26th. This is a request from CN. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, let me see if our staff are here to present this. I don't see anyone. Proclamation for the District of Squamish proclaim October 18th to the 24th, 2021 as Waste Reduction Week. I remember last year I challenged all of you to a waste reduction challenge, which I did quite well at. But anyway, I'll look forward to staff letting us know. Oh wait, there's Shannon now. Ms. White, are you going to present on the proclamation request?
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. I was just
Apologies.
bragging about my accomplishments last year during Waste Reduction Week.
Yes. Congratulations. I heard about the amazing job that yourself and everyone on council did. So it was an excellent challenge, and I'm very impressed by what everyone did and was able to achieve. And I hope that you all were able to carry forward the habits and the learnings from Waste Reduction Week last year. Apologies, I was sitting in the waiting room and I didn't realize that I needed to join the event, so apologies. So are you okay if I get started?
Go ahead, please.
All right. So my name is Shannon White and I'm the Integrated Solid Waste Specialist at the District of Squamish. As you may recall, I've been out of the office for the past year on maternity leave and am now back in the office and back in action. And today I'm here to request that the District of Squamish proclaims October 18th to 24th, 2021 as Waste Reduction Week. So for those who are unaware, Waste Reduction Week is a national event that is intended to raise awareness about waste, its environmental and social impacts. It's also an opportunity for Squamish residents and businesses to learn about waste reduction within their own lives and business operations, as well as, really important, an opportunity to celebrate our accomplishments. We never want to overlook those. And as you're all familiar with, the District of Squamish is committed through policies and financially to move our community along the path of achieving zero waste, and this proclamation aligns very closely to our goals. Squamish has made improvements in waste reduction over the past few years with our Recycle BC. So our Recycle BC per capita generation is almost double that of the provincial average, which is incredible. And we've seen the development of new, existing, and I have to say, exciting waste reduction businesses in town over the past few years. So in light of today's Waste Reduction Week proclamation presentation, I'd like to provide you with just an overview of several initiatives that we have planned for around that week. We will be taking a regional approach by collaborating with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District to ensure our messaging is aligned with theirs and then amplify the messaging that they would like to put out into the communities. We also are looking at working with the communications team to roll out a communications campaign around that time that promotes waste diversion and proper recycling habits. We also hopefully will be working with Squamish Can to potentially offer a panel discussion. That's still in the works. And we will organize a pop-up recycling depot for soft plastics and flexible packaging, as the theme for one of the days during that week is plastics. Solid waste staff will be coming before council in a couple of weeks to further discuss our waste diversion plans in really much more fleshed out and in detail. So this is just a bit of an overview today. And with that, I'd like to request that the District of Squamish proclaim October 18th to 24th as Waste Reduction Week. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. White. Council, any questions about this proclamation or Waste Reduction Week? Which I gather we'll be able to talk about in more detail in a few weeks when staff is back. Councillor Herford.
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor French. I will challenge you all once again to who can produce the least amount of landfill waste the week of October 18th to 24th of October. So keep track of your trash that week. Thanks very much, Ms. White. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to pull forward item 10A1. This is the section 57 notice for 40449 Air Drive. And we are joined by Mr. William to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. I'm seeing head nods. Thank you for your time, Mayor and Council. I'll give you a quick summary. Actually, I'll share my screen if I can here. There we go. That. There we go. Can you guys see my presentation?
We can. It's just not in presentation mode, Mr. William.
Okay, I believe I have to hit. Sorry, apologies. Leave. Oh.
Chad, if you just press F5, that sometimes works.
There we go. Is that it? It's
At the top there, it says display settings, hit duplicate mode.
there we go. Oh, sorry, it says it's stopped. Oh, 1 second here. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, sure, not if you don't mind. Okay. There we go. Are you guys seeing the cover page there now?
No.
No. Display settings.
Swap, maybe swap. Is that working now?
Is that, are you seeing that? Are you seeing it now?
No, I think you have to share your screen again.
Oh, sorry. That is through here. This one.
Okay, let's see.
So Matt's helping me with this here.
So it's a blind leading the blind.
the one.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'll start with just a quick summary, and then I can get into questions. So the building department received a couple of complaints in October of 2020 regarding the property at 40449 Air Drive. The complaint was to do with unpermitted addition to a single-family home. The second complaint was to do with an accessory dwelling that was built too close to property lines. So we investigated the complaint to determine that both the addition and the accessory dwelling would require permits as per District of Squamish bylaw, and we had no record of permits. So the contact was made with the owner at that time. There was some discussions that happened between the owner and ourselves, or in the building department rather, about finding a path towards compliance. And we've had some back and forth between October and present day, but we still have no clear path towards compliance as of yet. There are some building code related issues related to flame spread, which happens when a building or buildings in this case are too close to property line, and the ability for fire to spread between properties is increased, as well as some zoning related issues with regards to side yard setbacks. So our first step in achieving compliance, first official step in this case, would be to register a notice on title, or rather ask council to register a notice on title, so we could then ensure that this becomes public information should the property change hands or be put up for sale, so that it becomes shared information. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The property in question, this is the property we're referring to. And there is a survey of the property that we do have here showing the addition on the top.
Mr. William, could you just forward your slides so we can see it?
Sorry, I thought resume slideshow. Yeah, sorry. There we go. And here's the survey I'm referring to. So the addition of the principal dwelling is the small box at the bottom right of the property closest to Air Drive, and the accessory building is the noted as the shed that's built to near property line. So these were the two buildings that were the subject of the complaint. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, or I can go ahead with our motions.
I'll just ask council if there's any questions. Go ahead, Councilor Race.
Thank you. So are there any solutions to the portion of the house that's built too close to the property line? I know the shed presumably could be moved if it had to be. I guess it looks rather temporary just from the survey and description. But is there a solution to deal with the portion of the house that's built without a permit, short of tearing it down?
There are some building, sorry, through you, Mayor Elliott, there are some building code options available to reduce or to bring it into building code compliance. The primary issue is flame spread between properties. There are some options available to reduce the flammability and unprotected openings. That's something that could be proposed. Obviously, the other issue is a zoning issue with regards to a variance. But yeah, there are, I can think of a couple of options available without having to physically tear it down. Without doing the calculations, there may need to be a reduction, but that may not need to happen. They are within the 10-minute response time of the fire department, but we would need to see a building code proposal as to as a solution, and we can certainly assist in that.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Rowland, do you want to present the resolutions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Elliott. The first motion that we'd like to put forward is that council instructs the corporate officer to file a building bylaw and building code contravention notice respecting the property legally described as Lot 125, Block I, District Lot 511, Plan 11680, and located at 40449 Air Drive at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter. And then the second motion that we'd like to put forward is that council instructs the corporate officer in her discretion to commence legal action or proceeding in relation to the same property and seek injunctive relief in that action proceeding in order to bring the building into compliance within compliance with district bylaws, should compliance not be achieved within 6 months from today's date.
Thank you, Mr. William. So the owner of the property does have the opportunity to speak, and I believe that she's here this evening. So Ms. Jackson, if you could just state your name for the record and then proceed with your comments. Oh, and Chad, if you could take your presentation down, that would be great.
I think that should be down now.
I have prepared a less than 2-minute statement. Is it okay to read from my script? Okay. The complaint about my unauthorized structures was received in October. At the same time, I was in trial fighting for my rights as an abandoned mother of 3 children. The court judgment was rendered February 1st in my favor, granting me a divorce and the division of assets, which allowed me the process of transferring title of the property to my name. Until this time, my ex-husband was on title of the property and would not cooperate in any way, so I had no authority to meet the basic requirements of the building permit application. March 2021, the process of transferring title began with paying out and removing 2 charges on title registered against my ex-husband's equity in the property. This took 2 months. I was now in a position to apply to land titles to complete the transfer, but they objected to the wording in the court order, sending my lawyer back to court to reappear before the judge to have the wording changed. This process took all summer as a result of overburdened courts and holidays. We are now in a position to reapply to land titles, and I expect the transfer to be completed soon. Two, which is when compliance must be achieved. I am dealing with a very serious health issue that would hinder my ability to deal with this. So my father has agreed to manage the project with the help of a local builder and wishes to assure council that the process to achieve compliance will begin immediately with the expectation of a March 2022 completion date. Should council decide to vote in favor of the motion, I ask that it not be registered until title has been transferred, as this will further delay the process with land titles. For the record, as requested by the building department, the building permit application was submitted with survey and drawings and I did not build the structure. It was built 10 years ago by my husband.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Corporate Officer, I believe that council can ask Ms. Jackson questions. Yep. Council, any questions? or for Mr. William?
I just had, I don't know if it's so much as a question. I did receive some correspondence today from, I believe it was a friend of Miss Jackson's, who put forward a letter and mentioned the concern with the transfer of the property. I don't believe, and it's my understanding that if council approves the motion to put a notice on title, there should be no implication about transfer of ownership. This is simply just a marker on title that would identify that there is an outstanding issue. I don't believe that there would be any issue with how it would impact transfer of ownership.
Ms. Jackson, can I ask when you believe the transfer of title will occur into your name?
They,
Just
I'm the father.
You have to speak right into our mics. They're very touchy.
Oh, thank you. I was in touch with our Kelly's lawyer 2 days ago, and it is being sent into land titles as we speak. It will likely happen very soon. But the fact that it's taken us 6 months to get to this point, there are no guarantees, but it is definitely being worked on, and we do expect it soon.
in my name. Because my ex-husband is alive, but does not exist. He cannot be reached. We haven't heard from him or seen him in 5 years. That's the problem.
And if I may add one thing, as it relates to the transfer of title, I'm acquiring a rather significant financial position in this house as a result of supporting Kelly, and I will be financing the whatever needs to be done to achieve compliance. Bottom line is that Kelly is virtually destitute without my help, and so she certainly can't afford the additional cost of having this note applied to the title, and of course, at the end of the day, the cost of having to remove it. It would be wonderful if council could perhaps give her a little slack on that.
Thank you. Council?
I also have communicated extensively with Chad and kept and my health issue.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. William or for Ms. Jackson? Before you make your deliberations. Council Herfer.
Thank you. I'm curious about the, as we've been working on this to date from the district's perspective, without this transfer completed, we're not necessarily, are we communicating with the right parties? I'm just curious how that plays into that. This seems to be an interesting moment in time as far as ownership of the property and seeking compliance and all these pieces sort of come together right at a strange crux. So I'm curious if anyone can speak, give me some perspective there.
Through you, Mayor Elliott, Councillor Herford, we've been communicating exclusively with Miss Jackson. She did make us aware that she was in dispute with the property, but also we were made aware that the dispute was resolved at the court level just not yet at the land titles level. So at this point, the only point of contact that we've had has been Ms. Jackson.
Council Pettingill and then Council Race.
Question for staff, I guess, is there any restriction on our part while we might sort of say we want to hold off, for example, for X months on putting something on title pending progress, or are we obligated to sort of make a decision here and now?
Go ahead, Ms. Arthurs.
Chad, do you want me? I'll just take this one.
Thank you.
Because the property is currently in a situation with not going. So then council could delay, for 2 weeks, registration for 2 weeks or 3 weeks until transfer takes place. And could also, instead of moving to injunction after 6 months, put in the motion that it would be 12 months should compliance not be seen. And that gives Ms. Jackson a significant amount of time to get to compliance rather than it being March. It gives her some additional time. And because there are some safety related building code issues with that one building with the fire separation.
Council Race.
Thank you. I was just wanted to check in with Ms. Jackson or her father. Do you have any kind of construction schedule or an indication of when a remedy and construction program might start?
Yes, we do. We plan to take down the bunny hutch immediately, the shed on the property line.
And the addition to the house?
That is. Did you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you, but the rest of the world can't.
And we may have, thank you. We may have to get some engineering done. Initially, I'm committed to getting this project done. As I said before, I have a financial interest in the house, and I want this cleaned up. Department and with builders, the likelihood of being successful with this before we get an engineer and an architect, but I can assure council that that will all happen within the next 60 days.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any more hands. So Council, you've got the recommended motions in front of us. You also have information from the corporate officer about how you could change the wording of those motions to delay, to give time for the title to transfer, or extend the compliance period before injunction. Councilor Herford.
We'll all get used to this, these systems here at some point when we don't need them anymore. I'd like to move that we, on the first bit, the first motion, which is the council search corporate officer file, the building bylaw on BC, that bit, delay that for 30 days from today's date. And given what sounds like the complexity and just sort of the availability of contractors and so on we keep hearing about in Squamish, I'd like to on the second piece, move that out to 12 months from the 6 Is that clear enough for the minute taker? Sorry, there's a lot of wording there, but the timing piece is the only piece that I'm changing, and I'll speak to it in a second.
Is there a seconder? Councillor French seconds. And then go ahead, Councillor Herford, and then Councillor Race.
Thank you. And I believe that these motions should allow, and I intend them to allow for the smooth transfer of title, not further complicating an already complicated matter, and as well as give a reasonable timeline to come into compliance, and especially given the life safety of the issues as outlined by the building department. So, I'd like to thank everyone for coming here and adding additional details, and it really helps with my decision making here. But I think this is a fair compromise at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. And I'm going to support this resolution. It was pretty much what I was thinking about before Councillor Herford made the motion. The vesting order, court order, it's called a vesting order actually, is the thing that will actually transfer the title from the former owner into the new owner. It actually would have not been possible. I'm sympathetic with the position Ms. Jackson finds herself in, because it would not have been possible for her, for example, to finance through the house any kind of remedial work that might have to be done until that vesting order is finally registered. And it can cross the counter today or tomorrow or in the future. And it actually takes a few days for the land title office to process that. And then the house will be truly in her name. So I do have that sympathy. My concern, as also as expressed by Councillor Herford, is that there is a public safety issue here. And this is a notice on title. We could actually probably register it today, even in front of the vesting order. I don't believe they block a transfer of title, but I'm happy with the 30-day period. I'd even invite staff to, if work does commence in a timely way, to bring back to council a need for the actual registration in 30 days. If things are going well and there's obvious action, but I'll leave that to staff to consider. But for the moment, happy to postpone registration of the Section 57 order and to extend out the injunctive portion for at least 12 months so that there is ample time, barring any significant complication, to allow for the work to be completed. So I will support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Speaking in favor of the motion, I'll point out that this isn't the first time we've dealt with one of these Section 57 issues, and it's worth noting that in previous cases, the property owners have been far less cooperative and have not taken responsibility for the construction that they've gone ahead with. In this case, we're seeing that responsibility is being taken, and I'm comfortable with taking a relaxed approach and allowing some extra time. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. I want to thank staff for being impartial when they bring these forward and providing the context. I think that discretion is always up to council then to make a decision. And so I think we've found a happy medium that meets the public safety needs and also provides a bit more time and discretion for the homeowner so that that they can start to take some action once that title is transferred. So really appreciate you coming tonight, Ms. Jackson, and explaining the circumstances to council. I know that's not easy, and but it's been helpful for us in making the decision. And as Councillor Ray said, ask staff to use their discretion within the 30 days, whether the registration is necessary if significant action has been taken. So with that, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. William.
Thank
very
you,
much,
Mayor and
Mr.
Council.
Martin. All right, so moving back to our agenda, we now have District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw for the Wildfire Development Permit Area 2809-2021. And I'm turning this over to Mr. Gunn, is that right?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I have a presentation that I'd like to give, but there we go. Now I can do that. All right. Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Gunn. I'm a community planner here at the District of Squamish. Our objective today is to present a suite of bylaws for initial readings that will help reduce the risk to public safety, property, and the district's forests from wildfire hazard. There are 3 bylaws being contemplated. Bylaw 2809 is an OCP amendment that introduces a wildfire development permit area, or DPA. The bylaw is proposed for first and second reading and to schedule a public hearing. Bylaw 2834 is a new wildfire landscaping management bylaw and is proposed for first, second, and third reading. And bylaw 2825 is an amendment to our land development procedures to delegate approval of wildfire-only development permits to staff. And this bylaw is proposed for first, second, and third reading. I want to begin with a quick background to the project. Development of a wildfire DPA is a recommendation of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which was recently updated. Given our proximity to extensive forested areas and the expectation for longer and more hazardous fire seasons given climate change, it is important to increase the resilience to interface fire hazard for our community. Staff previously engaged Bruce Blackwell, who has drafted multiple wildfire DPAs in the province, to assist in bylaw development. Staff presented the project to the Committee of the Whole in January of 2020, at which point we outlined an approach and proposed mapping. At that time, Council indicated support for a high level of protection and included direction to expand the DPA to include all areas of the community that could be subject to wind transported embers. And this led to the establishment of a primary and secondary area, which you can see on the map, the yellow being the secondary and the red being the primary area. And this is the area that the DPA is proposed to apply to. Staff presented again to the Committee of the Whole in March of 2021 regarding the draft DPA and a proposed phasing approach to address capacity issues in the building department. At that time, Council indicated support for one staff member to implement the program, a new staff member to help implement the program due to the capacity challenges. And Council also provided direction to improve clarity around the proposed phasing and to focus on education to encourage voluntary compliance. As a quick overview, I want to outline proposed measures in the wildfire regulations, just so we're all on the same page. There are kind of 4 key elements that we're focusing on. The first is fire-resistant roofing. This is a very important factor to prevent structures from burning in the event that there's an ember shower from adjacent wildfire. The second is fire-resistant building components. This includes things like cladding, decks, windows, eaves, soffits, vents, gutters, and chimneys. The third is landscaping, which involves a set of specific regulations that restrict how fire-prone trees and shrubs can be used in the 10-meter priority 1 zone around buildings. It includes requirements for spacing of these plants and trees from each other and from buildings, and it also prohibits the use of 3 specific high-risk trees and shrubs, which are juniper, cedar, and yew. And finally, there are subdivision design guidelines. These are guidelines that are intended to ensure site design minimizes risk, enables firefighting in adjacent green spaces, and enables evacuation. Several revisions have been made to the wildfire DPA guidelines in response to Council feedback from the March 23rd, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. I'll just go over those. References to specific materials were removed from the guidelines to increase design flexibility and to align with form and character DPA guidelines that encourage the use of low carbon and locally sourced materials. Council also directed staff to clarify phasing and the application of the guidelines in the version that had phasing. Following further consideration, staff now recommend that the DPA phasing that was proposed in March is eliminated and that the DPA be applied in its full extent from the time of adoption. And the bylaw that's before council reflects this approach. This recommendation does still require the resourcing capacity in the building department that council was supportive of at the March committee of the whole meeting. And then finally, council directed staff to increase community education to encourage voluntary compliance. And we've done some consideration around that. Education around the DPA program will be integrated into the Fire Smart education program that's currently driven as a joint Squamish Fire Rescue Emergency Program Initiative through grant funding. And then in addition, the implementation of the landscape bylaw that's considered is intended to focus on education rather than ticketing and enforcement. We really see this as a tool to help bring awareness up in the community so that we can all move towards having safer structures and safer homes. In addition, at council suggestion, the DPA guidelines were applied as a test to an existing area, in this case, the Loggers East neighborhood development applications, and to see how it would play out. And in that examination, no substantial impacts to developable areas were found. The riparian area guidelines only apply to subdivision, and the wording allows flexibility. Residential rear yard setbacks are already similar to the 10-meter fire priority zone area. As noted, staff recommend that the wildfire DPA be applied in its full extent, eliminating the phased approach previously proposed, which was proposed due to resourcing constraints. Given the increasing threat of wildfire hazard and the corresponding need to prioritize the protection of the community from that hazard, a phased approach was viewed as adding unnecessary delay. Additional processing capacity for building services proposed in the upcoming budget will allow for implementation of the wildfire DPA and associated regulations. And in addition, elimination of the phased approach improves the clarity of the DPA for community and staff. It was quite a convoluted implementation process, and this is going to make it much clearer as to what's going on. The overall approach of this project is being is to begin moving the community on a path towards wildfire resiliency. Our community does have a long way to go. There are many properties in our community that are quite far from fire smart. And you know, if you want to imagine some of those, you think of the houses that have continuous cedars for privacy hedging. That's the type of landscaping in our community that makes us really vulnerable. And so our intention is to improve incrementally over the coming decade or decades by educating residents about what appropriate choices they can make. But we feel that approach really needs to begin now because we do have a long way to go. So this table identifies how the guidelines are applied to the primary and secondary areas. The key takeaways here are that small subdivisions and subdivisions in the secondary area are expected when a covenant is registered on title. Single family and duplexes, small subdivisions in secondary are exempt when a covenant is registered on title. Single family and duplexes are exempt when they're built with fire resistant roofing, and all multifamily, industrial, commercial, and mixed use buildings must meet the guidelines. The proposed wildfire landscaping management bylaw that is on the agenda was previously presented to council as an item to be addressed in phase 2 of the DPA, but given that we've eliminated the phasing, that's been brought forward for consideration of readings at this time. The content of the landscaping bylaw reflects guidelines that were discussed and considered as part of the wildfire DPA. They've been reviewed by council in our previous meetings, and they've been considered by the public and stakeholders throughout the engagement process. What the bylaw would do is regulate the installation of new landscaping and the maintenance of existing landscaping within 10 meters of buildings and structures on all properties. The intent of that bylaw is to help protect properties from wildfire hazard that aren't captured by the wildfire DPA, such as established single-family residential areas. The regulations include key fire smart landscaping practices, such as avoiding planting cedars using juniper, hedging, and spacing out coniferous trees away from buildings as well as from other conifers. Now, given the popularity of some plantings like cedar hedging in residential areas, this bylaw is likely to generate some community concern, but these were identified by our wildfire expert as critical changes to make in managing the resilience of our community. And one note is that further stakeholder engagement since the last council presentation actually resulted in the removal of a couple of the landscaping regulations, which we originally had in there, but were deemed to be too potentially negative impact to existing trees, the health of existing trees, that some of the regulations and the way that they'd be implemented could end up leading to too much damaged trees and having endangered trees created. So we did pull back slightly from what we had previously. And it's also important to note that the bylaw will not mandate the removal of existing landscaping. Any existing landscaping that complies with the existing regulations is granted legal non-conforming status and does not need to be removed. And that is a concern that we have heard already. There is a letter submitted today that highlighted that concern, but the bylaw and the DPA does not require people to go and remove existing landscaping. One key point that must be made is that implementation of District of Squamish Wildfire Landscaping Management Bylaw will focus on education, as I stated earlier, rather than ticketing. The intent is to follow the following guidelines: that we want to seek voluntary compliance with the bylaw provisions based on increasing awareness regarding associated fire risks and the suitable alternatives to managing those risks. But we will consider officer-initiated enforcement for situations where there's a failure to comply with guidelines of an issued wildfire development permit. So that would be in situations for multifamily, commercial or industrial, where DPA was approved, and if there's a lack of compliance with that DPA. To support education about landscaping alternatives, we've prepared some detailed information resources about suitable options. They've been prepared by a landscape architect that was working with the wildfire consultant, and then synthesized with our wildlife attractant objectives. We have a set of kind of guidelines around what plants we can use to wildlife. And so that was all brought together in this package that's really created specifically for Squamish. And in addition to a document that talks about what plants are suitable, we also have a specific document about alternative privacy hedges, because the hedging where cedars are often used are a particularly hazardous item. And so we've got a specific document about alternatives to those types of hedges that are hazardous, that use deciduous trees and are thus less hazardous. And so these are expected to be important aspects of the education program. Public engagement for the project has included 2 virtual open houses, a survey, targeted feedback from local development industry, a meeting with the Development Liaison Committee of the Urban Development Institute, a meeting with the Advisory Design Panel, and a stakeholder neighborhood walkthrough with District of Squamish staff and local environmental and arborist consultants during refinement of the landscaping bylaw. We've also reached out to local landscaping companies and regional landscaping suppliers for feedback on the proposal, though we have not received much response from that, despite several efforts. We also reached out to several government agencies about the proposed bylaws. The Agricultural Land Reserve was supportive of the change. The Squamish Nation indicated support at the staff level in discussions regarding the topic early in the process. Once the bylaws were drafted, they were forwarded to the SLRD, First Nations, and provincial agencies, though no further responses were received from these referrals beyond what I've already mentioned. The recommendation for council from staff is that council give the OCP bylaw first and second reading and schedule a public hearing for October 5th. That the landscaping management bylaw be given first, second, and third reading. That the land development procedures amendment bylaw be given first, second, and third reading. And that we pass resolutions related to the engagement for the OCP amendment. And as you can see on the screen, there is a fairly lengthy, text-heavy set of resolutions related to the OCP engagement. So just as a quick bit of context, under the Local Government Act, for OCP amendments, council must consider if the engagement for the amendment is appropriate. And so the recommended resolutions reflect that council has made this consideration. And it's something that we have to include in all of our OCP amendments. That concludes my presentation. Here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. So council, any questions about either of these bylaws? Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Gunn, I have set of questions regarding engagement. I note that the timing of the engagement process was during the summer season, vacation season, and we may have missed people due to that. Of course, we'll have opportunity to bring those people into providing input through the public hearings upcoming, but that may have been some factor. But I'd like to specifically address two types of adjacent lands. And because of their adjacency to the areas that would be subject to this proposed DPA and bylaw, I wonder how they may be of interest. Firstly, under the recommendation, there's reference to no consultation under the Local Government Act is required for any adjacent regional district. It would strike me that there is the regional district, given the proximity and adjacency of lands under their jurisdiction right next to our neighborhoods, there should be some interest here. And I wonder how we might, or whether we might have, what type of liaison could we encourage with regional district staff? And I'll just follow up with another before I have you offer feedback. And that is the private managed forest lands. And we have private managed forest lands immediately adjacent again to residential areas that will be subject to this bylaw and DPA. Now, in the introduction, you mentioned that the Agricultural Land Commission is referenced that consultation is obligatory, and you have undertaken that consultation. My question regarding the private managed forest lands that are adjacent to residential areas is whether the private managed forest land council might be an agency for, to quote your term, targeted feedback. I note in the private forest managed forest land council regulation, they do address responsibilities of the council, and there are very related responsibilities closely tied to our area of concern here. So that question regarding engagement, how do we address regional district? How do we address private managed forest land adjacent to the area that comes under the scope of this DPA and bylaw? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Through you, Mayor. So first off, the question, first question was about engagement with the regional district. And to be clear, through this process, we did forward, I think at two different points. One, I think partway along, and then at the end, I believe the bylaws, certainly the bylaws have been forwarded to the regional district for comment, the SLRD, and no response was received. What the provision in that OCP OCP language is intended to reference is adjacent regional districts. In a typical OCP process, we need to consider if we need to talk to the regional districts that are next to our regional district, right? So, Metro Vancouver, you know, the ones that are beyond SLRD. And so in that resolution, the proposal is that council consider whether we think we need to go and talk to Metro Vancouver and the other surrounding regional districts. And that is there more engagement required with the SLRD beyond what has already been done? Given that we sent the package to the regional district and didn't hear a response, my recommendation is that we probably are not required to do additional engagement because they have not indicated an interest in pursuing engagement on this topic. And because Metro Vancouver and other surrounding regional districts are even more removed, staff suspicion is that they would have less interest in the nuances of our interface fire hazard DPA. And so the motion is simply asking council to say, yes, this seems like an appropriate level of engagement that has been undertaken. So that's kind of the context there. And then in terms of the private managed forest lands, yeah, a good point. They probably, perhaps we should have sent a letter to them about the project. However, the regulations that are proposed and the guidelines are specific to the 10 meters surrounding structures and the subdivision of land. It's really about how we're protecting the houses, the buildings, the businesses of our community by keeping those buildings built in a way that have a spark lines on it, they don't burn, and keeping the 10 meters around the building set up with landscaping so that if a spark lands in that area, that doesn't burst into flame and then transfer to the house. So it's quite specific to the built-up context and how we protect those buildings. And so it may be that the private managed forest lands are an important place to consider wildfire hazard, but probably through other tools that would be outlined in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Mayor Elliott, I do have another follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Gunn, in your report, you have stated that the DPA guidelines have been tested against current Loggers East neighborhood development applications and no substantial impacts to development area were found. My question is regarding applications, because when we address the Loggers Lane East sub-area plan, I know in my own comments, I tried to highlight that it's perfectly obvious there are going to be some hardship cases in that area. And I'm not sure of the status of, there's a couple of those lots in particular that have voiced concerns, whether they have brought forward applications. So have you only looked at applications, or can we be satisfied that you've looked at those hardship cases that do exist in those neighborhoods as to impacts? And I'll also add, of course, these land property owners do have the opportunity upcoming in the public hearing, but I'm just curious about that. Which properties, only the applications, or have you looked at those hardship cases? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I do have to apologize. There were 2 staff members working on this project, and that particular aspect of the project was handled by my colleague, who is not available at this time. It does look like, though, perhaps Jonas can speak to that.
Yes, through you, Mayor. So I don't have the direct experience of applying it to development applications, but I do know that we didn't apply to all scenarios in the Loggers East area. And I will say that as any development permit area, the hardship cases, they've looked at on a case-by-case basis. So rather than trying to craft the guidelines that would anticipate hardship, the council or if the development permit area is delegated staff have the flexibility to address hardship cases on a case-by-case basis as applications are being considered.
Thank you, Mr. Velenis. That's satisfying me, Mayor Elliott.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Councilor Prengo, and then Councilor French.
Yes, thank you. Just in terms of the covenant, so if you, instead of adhering to the DPA, you would have the option of entering into a covenant. Can you give us a sense at a very high level what such a covenant might say?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The covenant will have the provisions of the DPA in it. The covenants to be registered register those provisions that are outlined in the DPA, the guidelines.
So I'm feeling maybe I'm a bit dense here, but I took it that you would take on some sort of extra legal liability instead of, if you didn't want to adhere to the DPA or you accept the covenant as part of developing in the DPA area, is what you're saying actually.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, the registration of the covenant registers the guidelines of the DPA onto the property, so that further development has to comply with that. So that rather than getting the DPA, there's a covenant that they need to comply with in future development on that parcel.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you for the clarification.
Councilor French.
Thank you. Mr. Gunn, in your presentation, thank you for paying particular attention to the what would become legal non-complying yards in our community. As we all know, there's a lot of cedar hedges in well-established neighborhoods in our community. So there are some, though, that are fearing above and beyond. If they were to sell their property, would there be an obligation by new incoming owners to make those properties compliant?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor. The legal non-conforming status is not tied to individuals or owners. It is tied to the use or the what is existing on the property, and so it continues as ownership changes. The situation in which it does not continue is if well, there's two situations. One is if it's discontinuous for a period of time, and I think given the realities of landscaping, that would have to mean like a whole year. It would have to be discontinuous. So there was like a period of 6 months where it was not continuous. Or if in structures they talk about if the structure is destroyed. So I suppose if there was a fire and all of the landscaping was burned down, then it would may not be then permitted to be replaced. But I think at that point that would probably be a preferable option. But no, a new owner would not have to comply with the regulation.
Thanks for clarifying that, and I have a follow-up question. You got my attention when you talked in your presentation about bumping up against capacity issues, and that has me wondering, has any financial support been accepted from developers in creating this work?
I'm, through you, Mayor, going to turn this over to Jonas. I believe no, but I should just maybe let Jonas answer that.
Yeah, no, this just want to confirm that this is a district project. So the crafting of the DPA is it's our project that's been funded by the district.
Oh, actually, we received external funding. We applied to Bill Stoner through the emergency management program, did receive funding from the provincial government for
That's
this
right.
project.
Yeah, it was a grant.
Yeah, it was a grant.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Gunn, is there a scenario by which the house next to me got a relaxation on their side yard setback and I plant a tree that is 10 meters from my house, but not 10 meters from theirs? Do we contemplate that? Because we talk about things being a certain distance from the building on the lot that we're talking about, but it doesn't ever reference that it also has to be 10 meters from a neighbor. So I'm just wondering if staff contemplated that relationship between properties.
I believe that the structure of the DPA and those regulations are such that the considerations are internal to the development application property. Jonas, is that your understanding as well?
That's correct.
And so, yes, that there's that possibility that you could have scenarios where vegetation placed could be closer to another property. Although, in general, the setbacks in adjacent properties are generally similar, and so the location of structures is likely going to be equidistant from the property lines. So the chance of putting something in your backyard and then the property, there'd probably be quite limited situations where that might come into play.
Yeah, and I was thinking also about accessory dwelling units like carriage homes that are being built on some lots. And so I think as we bring this back for public hearing, it would be interesting to hear from staff just to look at those scenarios where people add density to their lot, and where is it compliant or not compliant with their neighbors. So just because it makes it okay for me doesn't mean I'm necessarily okay that my neighbor just puts a high risk tree within 10 meters of my property line or my house, even though it's on their property. And I don't know if that can happen with all the setbacks we have in our residential zones. But I'm curious as we start to add this gentle density in carriage homes and accessory dwelling units, what that might look like. So that'd be interesting.
Yeah, so it's a good comment, and we can endeavor to bring some examples of how that might play out. One kind of contextual piece I would add to it is that the priority one area is actually fairly large. It is going to, for many parcels, encompass most of the property, and so most of what I would hope that we see for the installation of landscaping moving forward is rather than trying to find places to squeeze in flammable trees, that we probably will be moving away from these more flammable trees, and that what it gets planted, because much of the property or most of the properties or all properties in many situations will be within that priority 1 zone. And so the landscaping I think that we're going to see moving forward is if we get compliance with these regulations, will look quite different from what we're seeing. The bulk of the issues that we see for hazards, they're just not going to be supportable under the proposed regulations.
Great, thank you. And then, given that we're going to have a lot of legally non-conforming landscaping out there, given our community's relationship and love of cedar and juniper, we have a lot of education to do, but can that extend to nurseries that are providing these type of plants? Like, can we attach warning labels to these types of trees within our jurisdiction? Can that sort of thing happen so that people are getting the education while they're buying the plants?
Yeah, so great question. And to be honest, this has already been a topic that we've been thinking about. And I mentioned it briefly, but probably didn't put enough detail into it. But we've already tried to reach out to the local suppliers and say, hey, and those are the big box stores, and say, hey, we've got this bylaw that's proposed. It's going to have these restrictions. Now, I'll tell you, big boxes are a bit black box, and it was not successful in terms of trying to reach whoever is in charge of making those purchases and then stocking the shelves. And then also, I've sent out information to like all the big suppliers in the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley. Again, not surprisingly, there were no responses. So I think we recognize that as a challenge. I would say one of the challenges with moving forward on that is that our local suppliers, one could say, well, we supply also outside of Squamish to other, like people come from Whistler or further south, and we want to have product for them. So that could be a challenge. And so I think what we had kind of come to, which is I think where you landed as well, is that our best bet may be to try and speak to staff that work in the on the retail floor and say, hey, just so you know, it'd be great if you could tell your customers that these products aren't allowed in Squamish. And so, yes, I think that's an important piece of it. Our initial steps on there haven't been very successful, but we have identified it as something we probably are going to need to do some targeted discussion with those businesses. But we haven't sorted out a plan to do that. But yes, I think that's an important piece. And I think there's probably going to be a fair bit of contemplation on how we implement this and over the coming years. And I think that's going to have to be part of it.
Thank you very much. So just so that I'm clear, the enforcement will only apply on those that require DP, and education applies everywhere else.
Yeah, that's the policy that we would like to use in implementing this this bylaw. There are some potential challenges with implementing a rigid ticketing based approach. For one, it could lead to neighbors complaining against each other and that tying us up, and two, just the amount of energy that could be or capacity that could be used in trying to implement using a ticketing approach. Also not really the strategy. We want to get buy-in and get the community to work with us on it. And so yes, the goal is for broadly across the community to work on strictly in an education basis to provide the resources, the information, and both through education programs, and then if they're compliant, if there's a complaint registered, to go out and to provide the educational materials to try and get compliance. But where there is a DPA that's been issued for either commercial or multifamily mixed-use building, and they are not compliant, a bylaw is a much easier tool to use for enforcement than an injunction process for a DP. And so we see that as an appropriate use of the compliance strategy of ticketing in combination with or in relation to working with stratas that are responsible for those projects.
Well, my last question is, can you give me examples in working with your colleagues on where we mentioned in the bylaw that where the wildfire DPA guidelines are in conflict with our tree management bylaw or DPA1, our environmental DPA guidelines, that the wildfire DPA comes second, that the tree management bylaw or the environmental protection comes first. So can you provide some scenarios where that might happen that we discussed with our staff?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So that was those provisions came up through discussion with the environment staff, and I think what was raised as a concern from their perspective was that sometimes these types of bylaws become utilized by property owners who are looking to increase viewscapes or get more sun and want to start chopping down trees that are blocking those amenities. And so we wanted to make it very clear that this is not a open license to go and chop down trees. To be honest, we didn't go through and kind of identify what those scenarios would be. We just identified that the environmental values would always trump these wildfire regulations, particularly because that is a well-known problem that these get turned into mechanisms for clearing so that people can get more sun and more views.
Thank you very much. Councilor Rice.
Thank you. Just to the mayor's question about the property next door. Actually, the way I read the bylaw, it says you may not plant within 10 meters of any building or structure. And so I don't know that it is restricted. But in my neighborhood, and maybe quite broadly in the community, the side yard setbacks are 5 and 10. In other words, 5 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other side. And so between every building, there'd be 15 feet, which of course is not 10 meters. And so it'd be impossible to plant between the buildings where they share the property line. And so you could plant closer to your property line in the backyard or the front yard setback or somewhere where the building isn't. So it's just the 10-meter difference, I think, the distance rather, is the thing that will prevent things significantly from being planted between the two buildings, if that's the intent, which makes sense. I know I have personal experience at my house with myself and my neighbor with a tree that started off as a cute little Christmas tree 3 feet high and ended up brushing against both buildings. So we took it out, but that can happen quite easily between the buildings if you're trying to plant something, because there just isn't 10 meters there to start with a lot of properties. And I'm fine with that, as I say, as long as that's the intent.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands, so there's a number of motions in front of us. Nope. Can we do them all at the same time for the OCP, Ms. Arthurs, or do we have to do the readings first and then the rest?
Readings first, and then you can do that last batch of the group.
Okay, so we can
bylaws
do
are-
the readings and setting the public hearing together? Nope, separate. Okay. So staff recommendation is that the OCP amendment bylaw 2809 be given first and second reading. Would someone like to move that? That's moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor French. Any further comments on that bylaw? Councilor Pango.
Just glad to see this coming forward. I did, after reading the report, have a fair number of questions about the grandfathering of existing landscaping and so on. And the presentation this evening cleared it all up for me, so I didn't have to ask questions. But I think just to highlight, and maybe I should have got this in the next resolution, but when this comes to a public hearing, to make sure that people are very clear about existing versus new landscape and what's impacted it is going to be very valuable for the conversation, I think.
Councilor Race.
Thank you. And Councilor Pettengill kind of jogged my memory a little bit. But when this came to committee of the whole, and I remember making a comment, I think one of the critical aspects of this program is going to be education when we're dealing with existing properties. New properties, obviously, it's a clean slate, and so there should be no difficulty with complying. But I can tell you from personal experience, even with existing properties that have a lot of shrubs around them, like my place, it's relatively easy to do some selective pruning and some selective removal to substantially comply with this. And I think to make your property maybe not perfect, but much safer with relatively little cost or inconvenience to the landlord. And so I think education and people knowing where the risks are and what can be done to correct it is going to be a large part of making this program successful in the existing neighborhoods.
Councilor Ford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion, and I'd like to thank staff for recognizing the urgency of the situation, given that just a few short months ago we witnessed an entire town in our province succumb to flames from wildfire. So it's a very real threat to our community, and I'd like to thank staff for recognizing the urgency and coming forward with a more of an accelerated plan, and I'm happy to support it. So thank you very much for your work.
Councilor Henderson. Mr. Gunn, you can't hear Councilor Anderson?
No, me neither. I think it's on mute.
Trying again. Can you hear me now? Very good. So my comment I'd like to make in support of the staff recommendation here is not specifically on the DPA and bylaw, but on the broader theme of realizing their goals. And in fact, my comment isn't really directed to planning department, but our whole district team. This DPA and bylaw sets a high expectations for landscaping maintenance. Yet during the peak times of the year when this maintenance work is typically undertaken, we have reduced yard waste collection service. Our yard waste collection service is oriented around wild safe, and perhaps we need to think about orienting it around fire smart. In other words, we definitely have I think we do have a fire smart landscaping deficit currently in all of our neighborhoods. Maybe we should be thinking more broadly, more comprehensively about incentives, education, yes, but also our yard waste collection and neighborhood chipping day offerings. I think we need to look at these types of programs in addition to homeowner education to realize the goals of this bylaw and DPA. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I actually wasn't intending to speak, but after hearing Councillor Anderson's point about the yard waste collection, it is a good point, and it certainly was a frustration for me when I had a single-family residence and was finding that when I needed to dispose of yard waste, it was a challenge because the timing of the municipal program didn't quite line up with when I had an abundance of material. Having said that, though, I absolutely support this work and echo Councillor Herford's thoughts of the timeliness of this regulation with an entire town in British Columbia being wiped out by wildfire. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll support first and second reading. I prefer the changes, not taking a phased approach, but implementing it all at once. You know, when I look at this suite of bylaws, I think we're sort of, I think, providing a leading example in the province of how to make your community more resilient while respecting the fact that it takes time for people to transition existing landscaping. But this is where education is key, and hopefully people understand the difference between what a deciduous hedge, how quickly that might burn versus a cedar hedge. And maybe we should create a little video that shows that very clearly for people, but I'll leave that up to our Squamish Fire Rescue if they want to make some examples. But anyway, thanks staff, and I'll look forward to hearing the public's comments at the public hearing. So on first and second reading, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, that an in-person public hearing be set for October 6th and subject to any public health order to the contrary. Didn't I say October 5th? 5th. October 5th at 6 p.m. Sorry, that's what I read. Got those numbers reversed. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we'll do that for the purpose of Section 475 of the Local Government Act. That first clause, the second clause for 475, Section 2, sub B, and that the District of Squamish Official Community Plan amendment bylaw be considered to be consistent with our financial plan and waste management plans pursuant to Section 477. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments on those? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Gunn has already spoken to the following two bylaws. You don't have anything more to add, Mr. Gunn? Great. So then we are contemplating first three readings for District of Squamish Wildfire Landscaping Management Bylaw number 2834, 2021. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then District of Squamish Land Development Procedures Bylaw number, Amendment Bylaw number 2825, 2021. This is for first three readings to allow the work to be delegated to staff. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Up next, we're going back in time because I'm a little bit rusty and I forgot item 6, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. So this is anybody who feels they have a motion they need to bring to council that cannot wait 2 weeks. So seeing no one, tick that box. Sorry, council, a little bit rusty after a month off. I'd like to take a 5-minute recess now just to take a bit of a break before we do all our financial related bylaws. So we'll come back at 7:40, please, and we'll finish off the agenda. Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. Sorry about that. We started, but we didn't have our minute taker. So we are back in special business meeting. We're on item 9B3. So we have a number of capital works loans that we'll be talking about tonight, loan authorizations. And so our finance staff will make one presentation for all of them. And so I will turn it over to you, Ms. Proctor.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm just going to share my screen. Full disclosure, I'm working off a broken laptop right now, so I can't see you, but I can look in your general direction. Okay. And are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Elliott, members of council and members of the community. My name is Heather Boxer, Chief Financial Officer here at the District of Squamish. Tonight, I will be presenting to you the 2021 loan authorization bylaws. So the goal today is for council to give first three readings to bylaw number 2845 2021 through to 2855 2021. So a bit about the legal process. So section 179 and 180 of the community charter outlines the procedural requirements for loan authorizations. The charter requires a loan authorization be obtained by bylaw. The bylaw is subject to ministerial review and must receive the approval by the Inspector of Municipalities. The bylaw is then subject to approval of the electors, and staff are recommending the alternative approval process method be used. The alternative approval process was formerly known as the counter petition process and requires 10% or more of the eligible electors to sign and submit response forms in opposition to the proposed initiative. If that occurs, it will then require the local government to obtain assent of the electors in order to proceed. Once the AAP process is complete, the loan authorization can proceed to adoption and then subject to a 1-month quashing period before receiving the certificate of approval. So new to the district this year is to utilize the Municipal Finance Authorities, or MFA's, temporary borrowing option, which is authorized by Section 181 of the Community Charter. This methodology allows for temporary loans on a project to assist with cash flow during the construction phase, and is also known as a construction loan. There is no obligation to use the temporary borrowing. Rather, it is best practice to set up the temporary loan to support cash flow and to free up cash in case of emergency, which would be otherwise used for construction. It is particularly important to set up temporary borrowing when the organization has a high degree of project investment activity, which is the case for the district with the current investment in capital infrastructure, such as the Valley Cliff Fire Hall and the future real estate and facilities master plan capital investments, amongst others. Temporary borrowing is tied and therefore under the long-term authorization, so it does not affect the district's debt capacity. And also to note is that temporary borrowing is not a revolving loan in nature, so the total sum of its drawdowns cannot exceed the total amount of the bylaw. And then finally, cash issuance under temporary borrowing protects the loan authorization from expiring. In terms of loan authorization bylaws for 2021, we have the following, which are incorporated into the 2021 to 2025 financial plan. So it is important to understand that the timeline for local government budgeting and financing is lengthy. The loan authorization issuance process can take approximately 6 months to a year from bylaw authorization to cash issuance. Therefore, the financing process for items that are identified with a debt funded component in the current 2021 to 2025 financial plan as a placeholder the project scope details are yet, even with the project scope details yet to be fully endorsed by council, must begin the prior year to commencement of the project to ensure the financing is in place. So in other words, the bylaw authorization merely creates the funding envelope, but does not equate to the approval of the project scope or details. Loan authorizations can be amended or rescinded at any time. An example of this is the Public Works building, which has been slated to begin building in 2022. Details, decisions, and council endorsement are forthcoming in Q4 of 2021. However, the debt process must be initiated by approving the loan authorization bylaw to create the funding envelope and to secure funding for this project before it commences. To note, loan authorizations are grossed up by 1% from the project amount required by MFA. The amount is held as a security against loan against default, which is held in trust by MFA and is debt reserve fund and is refunded with interest at loan expiry. So bylaw 2845 and 2852, which is a temporary component for 16.1 million for the public works facility. We have bylaw 2846 and the temporary component, which is 2853 at 6.9 million for the new fire hall, number 2. And then bylaw 2847 and 2854 as the temporary component for 3.5 million for Pioneer Way extension. And then bylaw 2848 and 2855 is the temporary component for 6 million for Wooney Oak Park Sea Dike upgrade. And then we have bylaw 2849, which does not have a temporary component for 1 million of fire fleet replacement. Bylaw 2850, which is also does not have a temporary component at 1.1 million for the technology transformation project. And then bylaw 2851, which is 10.1 million and doesn't have a loan authorization, so a longer term component as it was approved in 2020. So this is just for the temporary component. at 10.1 million for the main fire hall, which is currently in construction. So the debt servicing limit, all loan authorizations are analyzed and approved by Municipal Finance Authority as well as the province prior to adoption. The MFA requires that debt servicing limit, so that's the principal interest paid yearly, is under 25% of the previous year's revenue. However, the district's long-term financial planning guiding principles and policy require the district's debt servicing to be under 20%. With these debt authorizations included into the current debt, the district is well under both limits at approximately 14% if all was issued at the same time. So I will now turn it over to council for any questions or points of discussion.
Council, any questions on the loan authorizations? Ms. Boxford, do you feel that we would approach that 14%? Or do you see this debt being issued at various times so we don't approach that number?
The debt will be issued at various times, so we'll have at the same time as you know the construction is complete and going to loan authorization, we'll have some being paid down. 14% is still a comfortable rate, so if we do approach that, being that you know there's other debt components or other debt projects being added onto the financial plan and future financial plans, that is still a comfortable rate. We don't see ourselves getting towards the 20% in the next 5 years. But that is certainly up to the financial planning process and what council is comfortable with investing in terms of infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. Ms. Boxford, with respect to the temporary borrowing, could you advise how long it is temporary and when does it become not temporary and go to confirm borrowing?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Temporary borrowing can only be from the time of cash issuance to expiry at approximately 5 years. So you really need to move it into long-term in that 5-year span. But what it does do is allow for the longer-term loan authorization to be triggered so it won't expire. So that is a benefit of having that temporary in place, is that you can issue some cash you know, during the project's construction phase, and it will just hold on to that bylaw. So if you have a project that lasts longer than 5 years, your long-term loan bylaw won't expire.
And you mentioned that it doesn't affect your debt borrowing limits. So I take it doesn't contribute to that 14% number until it becomes long-term. Is that correct?
The actual loan, the 14% is actually measured and triggered at the time of authorization. So they never allow you to authorize more than the debt servicing limit. So that limit is established at 14% now to say that's our capacity to borrow. So with the temporary borrowing, it's within the umbrella of that loan authorization. So you're basically just borrowing under that loan authorization at that point. So it's not incremental to the original longer term loan authorization.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. So these all have to be done individually, council. So first up is authorization bylaw number 2845/2021 be given first 3 readings. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, if you want to speak to any of these, just wave your hand. Authorization bylaw 2846/2021 for the new Fire Hall 2, moved by Councillor Pengill, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Authorization bylaw number 2847/2021. This is for the Pioneer Way extension, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Authorization bylaw, loan authorization bylaw number 2848/2021 for Honeoc Park Sea Dyke Upgrade Capital Works. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Authorization 849 for the replacement pumper truck. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish loan authorization bylaw 2850-2021 for the Squamish Technology Transformation Project Capital Works loan, which I understand is in its last year. Yay. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by me. Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish temporary borrowing for main fire hall Valley Cliff Capital Works number 2851-2021. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. It looks like a very beautiful building. Every time I drive by there, it looks better and better. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, District of Squamish, Capital Works bylaw number 2852. This is temporary borrowing for the new public works facility. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Temporary borrowing bylaw number 2853-2021 for the new fire hall number 2. Moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish temporary bylaw for Pioneer Way extension number 2854-2021. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then finally, the temporary borrowing for Hanaic Park CDEC upgrade bylaw number 2855-2021. Be given first readings. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Already taken care of item 10A1. So we are on to our consent agenda. Any items that present a conflict for council should be pulled from the agenda. If you want to pull a letter or any minutes, now's the time to do that. Councillor Anderson?
Yes, I'd like to pull 2 items. Item number 10 concerning the mass timber announcement from provincial government. And item number 29, letter from our Gary Buxton to Finward regarding the wood fiber LNG lease.
Anything else? All right. We'll deal with the items of correspondence at the end of item 13. Motion to approve the consent agenda that remains. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. There are no late agenda items. So under item 13, correspondence where action is requested that correspondence received from T. Smith regarding childcare crisis in Squamish be referred to the Director of Planning for follow-up and response. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by, I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is that correspondence from R. Hildred regarding the Eagle Wind Park Playground be referred to staff for follow-up and response. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. There is a request from the Council of Canadians, the Fish Farms Out of Coastal Waters campaign request for support and endorsement. So that is at Council's discretion. We can move receipt or you can move a different motion. Councillor Anderson? Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Any discussion?
Yes, just briefly, Mayor Elliott, it appears to me it's, of course, a cause we're well familiar with. We're very conscious in our region of our salmon stocks and preserving wild salmon. However, the nature of this campaign, it strikes me something analogous to stopping all old growth logging. To be frank, I think that the world of the aquaculture and fish farming is not a simple one, and its stakeholders include a number of First Nations actively investing in aquaculture and fish farms. So there's a lot of complexity to this world, and of course we would like to, we know where our hearts are and our concerns about the effects on wild salmon, but I suggest that this particular campaign is one that is not for our council to endorse at this time. Thank you.
Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on receipt. Any opposed? Motion carries. Squamish River Watershed Society letter of support requests that the mayor write a letter of support to accompany the SRWS's grant applications in order to continue offering environmental education programs. I will move that. Is there a seconder? Second by Councilor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have correspondence from M. Tassi regarding racist historic wording and signage, that this be referred to the Downtown Squamish Business Improvement Association and the Squamish Library. Councilor Herford, you're moving that. Councilor Anderson?
I'll second that motion, Mayor Elliott, and I'll speak to it as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I was one of the sort of resource persons, if you like, involved in the 2008 program to assemble the Downtown Heritage Marker Program. The library is referenced in the recommendation, and this is appropriate as they were another resource behind the project, including this particular plaque in question. And the library, of course, is very actively involved in issues concerning truth and reconciliation and First Nations liaison. However, I just mainly wanted to point out that the owners of the plaque and the persons responsible for the program are in fact the Downtown Squamish Business Improvement Association, as is referenced here, that the staff, that the letter we referenced there, but also the owner. The plaques, each one of them are co-owned by the business or building that which is hosting them. So at staff's discretion, it may be perhaps suggested to the Business Improvement Association that they pass on the letter to Anna's Interiors. That's all I have to say at this time. Just some clarity, offering some clarity as to the responsibility for the plaques and the owners of the plaques. There's a number of resource people around the program, but it is a program of the Business Improvement Association, and the plaques were installed with the support of the individual business or building owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Herford?
Well, I'd just like to thank the writer of this letter for bringing this to our attention. I walked past that plaque I don't know how many times and hadn't stopped to read it, and I made a special trip there to do so, and I was also taken aback. So I'm curious to see what the resolution of this is, and perhaps it's time, it's a worthwhile mission to look at the other plaques around town that would have gone up in the same process, and just see if there's anything else that we should be proactively dealing with instead of waiting for a complaint from the public. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate my colleagues' comments. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We also have a letter from P. Heinzman on about natural capital assets assessment for the Central Estuary, and that this be referred to staff. Moved by Councilor Race. I'll second that. Any comments? Councilor Anderson.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. I've given the report a close read. The cover letter states there is a goal by the district to begin to properly value monetarily our ecological goods and services to help us all understand its comparative value and inform our collective decision making into the future, unquote. I suggest that we also have other goals and priorities that we need to assess, and staff may give this some consideration as well. And that is, we have marine action strategy, governance, and shared leadership. And why I highlight this as another priority of the district is that as I read through the report, I think that attention to governance and shared leadership, that is, establish and maintain local marine-related coordinating bodies with clear terms of reference, would certainly benefit an initiative such as this natural capital asset assessment. There is, I think, a need to address co-management dialogue platforms. We are missing this for properly taking into account identifying the services and goods produced by these natural capital assets, the stakeholders involved, and I see that there's in fact more work could be done beyond the report and beyond the efforts of one organization. There are a number of services that could be identified by using a dialogue platform such as we have had with the Squamish Estuary Management Committee. There's definitely a number of stakeholders involved, and I suggest that that governance and shared leadership priority must be evaluated alongside this initiative, which I think does deserve consideration. I appreciate the reports spelling out the goals and background to natural capital assets assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. More comment? No, I won't.
Mayor Elliott, if I may, I've forgotten to mention something else I think I'd like to draw attention to. Throughout the report, there is a need to, I suggest, look at all of us, look at our definition of estuary and how we use that term. The report is focused on the wildlife management area. The estuary, by any definition, is much broader, and it includes not only the areas defined by the Squamish Estuary Management Plan, but other tidal sloughs. These are all relevant to natural capital assets, and we need to be more disciplined about how we use that term estuary, because we're going to be led astray in identifying restoration needs, in identifying issues, stakeholders, and opportunities. So that is another thing that popped out at me reading through this report, an inconsistent and incomplete use of the term estuary for the Squamish Estuary Complex. Thank you.
Councilor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm glad to see us thinking more and moving towards natural asset management. There is a lot of in our natural environment that we take for granted to our own expense. The only thing that, you know, when I read through these things, they do tend to, I think, underestimate or just, they don't touch on the non-economic value. They boil everything down to dollars and cents. And a lot of these places have values far beyond that, that we don't have a great objective way to qualify it. I think that's why we turn to dollars and cents, because it is objective, even if it's inaccurate. So just that to say that I'm glad we are heading in this direction, but let's not forget that there is a lot of value above and beyond these places.
Thank you, Councilor Pettingill. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Anderson, you removed 2 letters from the consent agenda. I'll ask you to address the first one now. That's letter 10.
Yes, thank you. This is the letter from the Ministry of, it's regarding the second intake open for British Columbia's mass timber demonstration program. I'd like to move that this letter be referred to staff, but that this staff not only include in our building department that are undertaking or evaluating projects and will be over coming years, but also the economic development department. As for our building projects, municipal building projects, it's going to be hit and miss as to we line up for the scheduling and what they're looking for in terms of taking advantage of this program and its substantial benefits or incentives. design fees, that sort of thing. But also, the program's goals relate to fostering a mass timber manufacturing industry. And we have in our economic development strategy, we've identified demonstration buildings, wood remanufacturing, and green building, all related to this program's goals. We have had in recent years 3 investors come to Squamish and propose mass timber manufacturing plants here. So I do suggest that not only be referred to staff, but among the staff persons that should receive this would be Economic Development Department. That's my motion.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor French. Any further comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Letter 29, please, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, thank you. This is the letter that our General Manager of Community Planning and Infrastructure has submitted on our behalf to the Ministry of Forest Lands and Rural Glenroy. And I thought that as there has been some public exposure to our conversation in July regarding the lease application for wood fiber LNG, and in hindsight, or as we've been informed, there was some information we were missing when we discussed this and passed this motion. And namely, it is what Mr. Buxton outlines in his letter to Glenroy. I quote, "I will acknowledge that the referral application was actually received by district staff on June 7th, leaving us 5 to 6 weeks to respond. I was not present at the July 20 council meeting to provide this information to council," unquote. So we've had some, we were confused as council and staff present on the day on July 20th as to the kind of the notice that we had received. And I think that really it is important for us to highlight this for the public this evening and offer that explanation and correction, if you like. We were simply unaware of the correspondence and the timing upon that we've received it or the staff has received it. That's what I had to say about this. I mean, I'd otherwise move receipt of this. Yes, move receipt of that correspondence with those comments that we should acknowledge that we were not as informed as we should have been on July 20th.
Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor French. Councillor Pettengill.
Yes, thank you. And just like to qualify, we did talk about whether or not staff had received notice, but our actual resolution was that council submit a letter to Flynn Road opposing wood fiber LNG's Crown Water lease application request outlining concerns with respect to engagement, inconsistent information, and missing information. So we did not make a specific reference to whether or not we had received a direct referral to staff or not. I think there was a number of concerns raised and discussed, and I think the resolution covered that.
Councillor French.
Speaking in favor of the motion, would like to thank Councillor Anderson for highlighting this. It's an important detail. And I think that it's relevant that this information be shared and publicly corrected so that there's an understanding of what transpired on that day and what led us to passing the motion that we passed in the specific details that were shared. Thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. And just the clarification also, I think my sense of that that discussion was that the complaint was primarily directed towards the province and the EA process and how they handled it, engaged, and so forth. Not so much around the merits of the actual application. And so I think it was initially incorrectly reported by a local publication, later corrected, but some people may have got the wrong impression from the headline. Okay.
Yeah, just you know, I guess we may have had different reasons for supporting the resolution, but I think I spoke about some of the inconsistent missing information. I believe that's still the case, and that is not the province's information that deals with. So, you know, I think appreciate my colleagues' comments and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to item 14.1. We have approval of minutes, recommendations from committee of the whole from July 27th that the North Shore Restorative Justice Society's Restorative Response Program funding request of $15,000 be directed to the 2022 budget process. Moved by Councilor Race, seconded by Councilor Herford. Any comments on that one? Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish endorse feedback regarding the Squamish Adventure Center revitalization options as noted at the July 27th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by, I'll second that. Any comments on this? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that staff bring back suggested official community plan amendments that will align with the district's OCP carbon reduction goals with the climate emergency declaration and latest intergovernment panel on climate change goals or other relevant, other science-based metrics. Moved by Councilor Herford. Seconded by Councilor French. Any comments on this? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we have the advisory design panel minutes from July 22nd to approve, or to receive, sorry. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. There's no in-camera announcements this evening. No unscheduled public attendance. Anybody online for open question period or in the audience? Councilor staff announcements. Councilor Herford.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity to invite everyone out for Squamish Days Lager Sports on Saturday, September 18th. So ticket sales are all online, and I hope to see everyone out. It'll be great to have the community together to celebrate one of our longest running 65 years, I believe. 65 will be next go round of our long running community events. And I'd also like to extend my condolences to the family of Tristan Lindsay. Tristan passed away going on a little over recently in a tragic accident on Highway 99, and there will be a service this Saturday. And my condolences go out to Lindsay and Dawson families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Or Councilor Herford. Councilor French.
Thank you. I wanted to highlight one of the letters that was sent to us by David Eby regarding the Squamish 2021 homeless count. A number of years ago, I volunteered to be part of a homeless survey, and it was surprisingly difficult work. So I want to acknowledge and thank all of those who participated in the 2021 homeless count. It is not easy work, and it is important information that gets generated by these counts. So to all those who participated, thank you for your work.
Councilor Pettingill.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things. I had the pleasure of attending the Squamish Lillooet Regional District meetings in July and August. Big agendas, there's always big agendas. Just highlight a couple of things of more note to Squamish. The board was asked to write, the chair, sorry, the board was asked to write a letter raising concerns about changes to ambulance services and asking to essentially ensure that we have good ambulance services in our corridor. Furry Creek development is moving forward and received first reading with a whole lot of feedback from the board. We spent some time discussing parental leave policy. It's, I think, a frequent surprise to people that this doesn't exist at the municipal level. So Squamish has been leading the way, and the SRRD is working on policy as well to support that. So hopefully we can get more diverse councils. And then in August, one thing I'll highlight is the SLRD is formally recognizing September 30th as a statutory holiday for truth and reconciliation. And then I want to thank Councillor French as acting mayor for overseeing the rising of the pride flag last week. It was a really good celebration, and I think there's some discussion, just the right amount of turnout during COVID times, not too many and not too few people. But it was great to be there. And then there's an opportunity to go to the overdose prevention site afterwards, where there was a barbecue, little site tour, and I got to do naloxone training, which is interesting. As a diabetic, I'm very familiar with needles and syringes, but this one is it's a bit more impressive, I guess we'll say. But they sent us home with kits, so we're hopefully able to help out if we need to help. It was very eye-opening. It made me think too of the homeless count letter from Minister Eden that Councillor French mentioned as well, and it is. Had a lot of time to think over the summer about the letters we get, and it's just very interesting to see where different people in our community are, and just as always, ever so appreciative of helping hands and everyone that works and volunteers there. There are some people in our community that are struggling more. It's great to see the support and effort there. And so thank you to everyone that makes that happen.
Thank you. I just want to thank Councillor French for serving as acting mayor. Councillor Anderson and Councillor Grace, who had to step in at the last minute to cover for Councillor Anderson at the beginning of September. I had a great break, and it was great to be away with my family, so thank you for that. And just a reminder that we have a council bike tour on Monday the 13th from 10 till 12. So more details are coming your way, council, but we'll be on the road for a couple of hours looking at some of the transportation infrastructure that has gone in over the last year, over the summer. And looking forward to a busy fall. It is UBCM this weekend next. So lots going on for council, and of course busy agendas and budget meetings on the very near horizon. So we're going to have a nice full fall session. So with that, motion to terminate. Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Sorry, any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the staff who supported us tonight. Thank you to the public who attended, and thank you to my colleagues.